Okay, well, I'm going to jump in. Once again, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Matt Friedman. I'm the CEO of the Mekong Club. The Mekong Club works with the private sector in a positive, supportive way. We do a lot of work with banks, manufacturers, retailers, the hospitality sector, and so forth. Today, we are going to be doing a webinar with Michelle Moore, who is here, and she'll introduce herself when she comes on in a few minutes. The title is Modern Slavery in the Digital Age, Cyber Scamming, Human Trafficking, and Transnational Crime in Southeast Asia. So we're all looking forward to what it is that Michelle has to say. But prior to that, I'd just like to say a few things related to the Mekong Club working group for association members as an update, some things that are coming down the pike that I'd like to let people know. To begin with, the Mekong Club has updated and refined and improved our baseline assessment for the banking community. This was a baseline that includes about 25, 26 questions that helps banks to understand the full set of activities that they need to understand in order to be addressing the issue of modern slavery. So it addresses whether or not your leadership understands the issue, risk assessments, whether you raise awareness, what types of codes of conducts or policies that you have, whether you have training and so forth. And this is kind of a diagnostic in order to help banks to understand where they are in their journey. As you can see below, there is one testimonial from somebody who recently filled this out. The baseline really opened our eyes to many topics and activities we weren't aware of. We use this information to refine and improve our ongoing efforts. It was a great help to us. And so what this tool does is it allows banks to identify what it is they're doing. And then, while this is completely confidential, at least see the average of the other banks to see where they fall in place related to that. And then it also becomes kind of a roadmap for knowing where organizations should address gaps that might exist within their business related to this particular topic. And it goes beyond just looking at the clients and the possible investments to looking at procurement and ESG as well. Another update is that we are in the process of launching some new trainings. Beginning in January, we'll do an advanced course on modern slavery typologies, where we'll really do a deep dive into a series of typologies based on a report that was really recently put out by the Mekong Club. We also will be doing another training on human trafficking into scam center typologies. We developed a report. You can see it to the left of that typology on the screen. And that one will go into a detailed dive into the typologies specifically related to scam centers. And we've also developed a 5-part series, Human Trafficking into Scam Centers, as an e-learning, which describes the issue and the various steps that a person goes through as a victim in this particular process and what can be done to address it. So all of these things are being launched within the next couple of months and will be available to association members. We have had requests from a number of banks in order to see if analysts from specific banks could come together to discuss and debate and determine solutions to specific problems that might exist that cut across the banks. And so what we will be doing in the near future is reaching out to our banking community to see if we can get 3 or 4 analysts. We will identify a topic that is of interest to all of the organizations, and then this collaborative team will come together periodically to address possible solutions. And then based on the recommendations, this will be communicated to the greater banking community. The idea is to take topics that, for whatever reason, don't get a lot of attention, but for which we feel like we can help move the envelope forward in terms of solving a particular problem by bringing the right people together to collaborate, to debate, discuss, and identify what solutions might be. I'll be informing you in the next couple of weeks related to that topic. There has been a lot of discussion recently related to ESG in human rights due diligence. I have been attending a certain number of banking sessions for which procurement and sustainability and ESG people come together. And it's not so much a presentation as it is an opportunity for individuals within the bank to ask questions about modern slavery, human trafficking, child labor, human rights, all of those things. And so, if your organization is interested in a session like that, I find them to be very interactive, and it really allows for there to be more of a discussion than kind of a traditional presentation for which you're just listening. In this particular case, there's a lot more involvement of the people who are attending this. The last two sessions that I've done, there's been about 6 or 7 people in the room, and I really benefited from it. And I think they did as well because people really kind of want to understand the S in ESG as it relates to the financial sector. And we've been doing a lot more work related to that. And so I think these insights would be very helpful. Just an update on the human trafficking into the scam trade. There's been a lot of media coverage related to the Prince Group in Shenzhen, who was very much involved in a lot of the Cambodia scam centers. For example, the U.S. government froze 15 billion in Bitcoin. UK government kind of seized 19 properties that were owned by them. Hong Kong authorities, approximately, I guess it's $354 million of assets freeze. We see it in Singapore and Taiwan. The point is it took a long time to get to a point where we were actually seeing these things take place. Now it's happening, and this is good news, and we're really encouraged to see that. With that, just a couple of housekeeping points. Please mute your Zoom. And if you have any questions as we go along, please put them in the chat. And at the end, there will be a survey that will be available for you to give feedback on this. And this is super helpful. It helps us to identify what we need to do to improve our webinars. And with that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, who will introduce herself and will do her own set of presentations. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Just going to share my screen now. Put my presentation up. Okay. So, as Matt said, my name is Michelle. I'm the CEO of Global Arms. I am based in a little town called Mesot in Tak Province on the western Thai border, right across from Myanmar. I've been here, living here full time, I think around 11, 12 years. I'm starting to lose count now. And we've been working in this space. We initially started in prevention, but then we moved into protection, working with victims and survivors of gender-based violence and child trafficking crimes, and then added the forced criminality crime typology onto what we do. So this is just a quick overview about what we're going to cover today. I'm going to take you a kind of a little bit around the world, but we're going to start in Manila in the Philippines. So I want to tell you a story. I have quite a few stories today, so please bear with me. This is about a set of twins, a boy and a girl. They were 3 years old, and they were in the Philippines with their parents for, I think it was around 3 months. It was unseasonably hot at this particular time of year, so their parents decided they were going to splurge and buy a fan. They were missionaries. And they wheeled the twins in their stroller into this little shop at the edge of the market and parked them in front of the fan so they could then go and talk to the sales rep. So the stroller was just inside the door. They were only talking to the sales rep for a few minutes and they turned around and they saw someone had taken the stroller and was running down the street. So both parents dashed off after them and they quickly found themselves surrounded by a gang. And the local gang was trying to negotiate to purchase the twins. They wanted to purchase both of them, but they were very interested in purchasing the little boy. The father had said to his wife, as soon as you see a gap in the circle, quickly grab the stroller and we'll run. So they were negotiating back and forth, saying, no, we're not selling our kids. And then a gap appeared. They quickly grabbed the stroller and ran, and they weren't actually pursued, which is a total miracle. Um, and that little girl was me. So I grew up hearing that story and with the understanding that not all children are safe. And I was very lucky that day, my twin and I. We were both very lucky that day that our parents were able to step in and that was all facilitated. But that could have ended very differently. So that is my why as to why I do this. I want everybody to have the right to feel safe and to have that opportunity to be safe. So, just going on stories, this are some of the women who work in our team. We are predominantly an all-female team. We do have one male on the ground with us, Scylla. But we all have our own stories. We're all survivors of different either GBV or human trafficking crimes. But I think one or two. So we are a survivor-led organization, and our programs are survivor-led programs. So we have a different I suppose have a unique perspective on working with clients and then the way that we approach our clients. So when I say the word clients, it's really used for victims and survivors. We would classify a victim as someone who's still in the violence or still trapped in trafficking, and a survivor who is someone who has come out of it. But after working with thousands of men and women over the last decade, we've had a lot of feedback about different words and the way we use our language. And there's a lot of people out there that don't want to be called a victim, which is understandable, and don't want to be called a survivor, which is understandable. I am definitely one of them. So we came up with the term clients because that is a very neutral term. And when they come to us, we help them and provide them with a service. Um, so that's, if you hear me use that word throughout the presentation, I'm talking about victims and survivors. So I want to take you now to Mae Sot in Thailand, where I currently am. Um, the main functions of Global Arms are based around protection, preparation, and purpose. Our protection arm takes care of our operations department. So within that, we have our Yes She Matters program, excuse me, which is an emergency response program for gender-based violence and child trafficking survivors or clients, and we cover those crime typologies. We do everything from, we have an emergency response team that responds on site to the violence, and we do that in partnership with Royal Thai Police. We have a hotline and then also an emergency centre. But the key part of our program is to have case advocates or case workers that actually walk alongside clients from start to finish. So we do have some clients we've had for say 4.5 years, I think was our longest one. That was a minor who had gone through quite a brutal rape. But then we have some clients who are only with us for 48 hours. So we stay with the person for as long as they need support, whether that's emotional support or advocacy, or they need help navigating the system, understanding their rights, because reporting a crime can be quite daunting, and especially when you don't understand the language. Not all of our clients are Thai. A lot of them are migrants or foreigners from other parts of the world. So if you don't speak Thai and understand the existing infrastructure, then you can struggle to navigate that system. That's why an advocate is so important. The other part of this is our counter trafficking unit. So when we started getting clients out of the scamming compounds, we realized that 78% were males, and we had a program for women and girls. So we stood up the counter trafficking unit to be able to cater for all of the men and young minors that were coming out, minor males. And we added that crime typology onto what we do. So our programs exist hand in hand, and they have a lot of the same features, but they're just two different crime typologies. We also have preparation. So part of our role we see is to try and prepare our clients for what's next. So we are with them from the time that they are free from whatever violence they've endured or the scamming compound they've come out of, all the way up until they've repatriated or reintegrated into their home communities back in their country. So we try and set them up as best possible. We do teach them hand-to-hand combat if they are willing to learn, so they can have some personal protection. We also teach them about emergency management and safety plans, so they're able to navigate those emergencies when they're on their own, when they've repatriated and been relocated. Another part of our process is also with the young people that we work with and also our team is to find their purpose. So Global Arms initially worked in prevention and was a training organization, and we've been one ever since, even though we do work in protection now. So a lot of our team will come to us. Some of them have come out of children's homes, they've aged out, or they're young people who are looking for an organization to gain some experience and to learn unique skill sets that you wouldn't necessarily learn in your average organization. So we give them an environment. Everybody is fully trained and we have ongoing training. So we make sure our professional development is up to date. And we all do also do our goals. So we all have different goals across the organization. Some might want to go to university, some might want to work in INGOs or maybe private industry. And so we help them work towards that and um, go through those stages of training and those steps to be able to reach their goals. So Global Arms at times can be a stepping stone for different young people, but they are all very well trained and they bring their own unique experiences from their, I suppose, younger years to our team, which then they're able to enhance and use to grow. So now we're going to move into Myanmar, which is where all the action is happening lately. I don't know if you guys have seen the news. We've got a lot happening on this side in the last 48 hours, but I'll go into that a little bit later. These are a range of scamming compounds. So if we go up into the top left, that is Taichung from up on the top of the hill on the Thai side. You're looking down at Taichung. If you go to the photograph up the top in the middle, that is at Taichung from a different vantage point and Jauki. The photograph at the top on the right-hand side, that is the edge of Yatai City or Shwe Koko, where we do have scamming centers. Then the bottom left is the edge of KK Park. In the middle is Gate 25, and then bottom right-hand side is KK Park from it's a drone vantage point, so you can see more of it. So these scamming compounds are probably the main ones that you would hear about in the news. There are almost 60 along our border, and there's a difference between scamming centers and scamming compounds. So in Cambodia, you mainly have scamming centers, which are standalone buildings or clusters of buildings within a community or a city center where law enforcement can access them. A scamming compound is a standalone walled illicit activities park. So you would have anything from human trafficking in there to definitely cybercrime. There's also drug trafficking, sometimes arms trafficking. So that polycriminality is very much front and center, and those scamming compounds are generally locked down. There's only a few, like Gate 25, and the other one is Gate 25, and I think Apollo are open. And when I say open, it means if you have Burmese nationals from the local community working inside the scamming compound, they are allowed to come to work and then go home at the end of the day or at the end of their shift. Most compounds are locked, so once you're in and you can't get out. So even if you are a cook or a cleaner, or you may be a translator, you live and work on site. This is the most recent photo of KK Park that I have. It was taken about a week ago. It was provided to me by another CSO that we work in partnership with. So there has been some damage to KK Park recently in the last couple of weeks where the Burmese military has entered in through KK6, which is down the bottom in the middle there, and blown up some buildings and put out a lot of political statements. They are pushing the agenda that they have taken over KK Park and blown it up and it's now not functioning, but that's not the case. No critical buildings were blown up. It was um, several villas and a water reservoir and an old dormitory building. So all of the offices that you need to um, carry out the crypto scams are still very much intact. Most of the dormitories, the commissary, everything to actually make this park function is still there. But they're trying to push to the international community that they are against human trafficking and not siding with crypto scams. I just wanted to show you this photo too because KK Park, it is, I suppose, the most well-known scamming compound in Myanmar, and it's one of the first, but I don't think people realize actually how big it is. So KK Park started out as just KK1, but now there's KK1 to 6. This is actually 6 scamming compounds, and then to the top left, that's Baoli. That's another separate scamming compound. So over the past, what are we in now, 2025? Over the past, what, 4 years? KK Park was once the most notorious scamming compound and is now probably one of the mildest, I would say. They have really ironed out all the kinks in terms of operations, um, how they run the scam, the types of scams they run, and the countries that they target. There is torture in KK Park, but it's not as brutal as a lot of the other scamming compounds. And the ransom to get out of KK Park is now a lot less than everywhere else. It's no more than 2,500 USD, whereas other scamming compounds, it can be anything from 6 to, say, 15,000 USD. And there's no guarantee they'll actually release you. At times, they will have you pay a ransom and then they'll sell you onto another scamming compound. So KK Park has become a lot tamer, but it operates now more like an illicit business park. It's a lot more professional in how it's conducted, and if you don't want to be there, so if you're trafficked in and you want out, they'll let you go, and they will get in what we would call career scammers or people who are applying for scamming jobs. So generally, how a scam works is, or how a company operates, I should say, is in the top left, we'll go clockwise around. You have people from all over the world applying for jobs. Since COVID, we have had a lot of nationalities all over the world. It's in the Western countries. It's not just in Southeast Asia. People have been looking for jobs and are willing to travel. They've also been looking for connection as well. So there are two sides to the scam. The one side that I predominantly work with is victims of trafficking inside scamming compounds, but there is also the financial side of the scam where someone is duped or tricked out of their generational wealth. So when we're talking about human trafficking victims, they are very willing to travel overseas, which is not a new phenomenon. It's been happening all over the world since before COVID, but the job market has really dried up. So crypto scams became an easy way to target people. So it's crypto scam companies, I should say. They list jobs on social media. They list jobs through job advertising agencies. Then they also have brokers and recruiters. In the beginning, we were seeing social media platforms covered in job ads, and that is still happening today. Meta is working towards taking a lot of those down, but there are still hundreds of thousands out there every day. Um, and that was predominantly the main way that jobs were being advertised. There were recruitment agencies being used. So, for example, the models who are trafficked into the scamming compounds, some of them would apply to a recruitment agency and have 2 or 3 legitimate jobs, modeling jobs with that recruitment agency. So then they would go back. And the third or fourth job would be for a scamming compound. And then that's how they would be tricked and lured into it. Um, Others would apply for job ads on forums, or they might see job ads advertised within their communities. Um, Fast forwarding to now, we're seeing a lot more face-to-face recruitment. So we have brokers and recruiters of their own nationality all over the world now. So some are operating within the scamming compounds and recruiting remotely, and then others are based actually in those countries. So for example, you would have in Ethiopia, you would have local Ethiopians on the ground operating as recruiters and then bringing people in. So a recruiter to successfully get someone on board, they're paid 3,000 USD per person, and they can recruit anywhere from, I don't know, 5 to maybe 50 individuals a fortnight. So that's a lot of money in their pocket, especially when there's no work on the ground and you're trying to get money to survive. So you would apply for a job ad, or you might go through a recruiting agency or a recruiter. Then you might have to do some literacy tests online. You would go through online interviews. So these are generally Zoom interviews where you would sit in front of a panel of maybe 3 people. It might be your direct line manager, the HR manager, and then maybe your recruiter as well. And you might have 2 or 3 of those Zoom interviews. So it looks like a legitimate process that you're going through. You actually might be sent a contract that you can go through, verify, and sign. There's a website that you can go and peruse, and it's spoofed from a legitimate company. So when you go to that website, you are actually looking up, um, you are actually looking up an actual company. So you can go to their GPS location, and their location will be on the map where the recruiter has says it is. So you could try and do as much due diligence as possible, and no red flags are coming up. Where the red flags start to come up is they buy your ticket, which is normal, pay for your hotel, you arrive in, say, Thailand. They say that the job is in Bangkok in Thailand, and you're met by a driver who has a sign with your name on it at the airport, and then they take you to the hotel. Everything seems normal. You then may get in the car the next day and they will say, we need to take you to Mesot because the regional headquarters, um, the boss is there and you need to go meet him and we'll bring you back to Bangkok. Where the red flags start is when you get to Mesot and you're in your hotel and you get a knock on the door at 3 in the morning and they go, quick, 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 pack your bags, we've got to get in the car, your transport's here. So you're half asleep, trying to get all your stuff together. You get out to the car and then you are driven away into the dark. And you might change cars 3 or 4 times, which is a big red flag. So you're messaging your recruiter, what's going on? I keep changing cars. The driver's not explaining anything to me. They're only speaking Thai. That whole time, your recruiter is dousing those fires and nullifying those red flags, saying this is totally normal. They've just got to make sure that you can get to this location. There's always an excuse or an explanation for anything, so you calm down. You get to the riverbank and you're shoved out of the car and you're met by armed soldiers who then force you into a boat and force you across the river. Then you're escorted by military all the way to the scamming compound. This is normally when people know something is totally wrong and they don't know how to get out of it. They don't speak the language, they have no idea they've crossed into another country, and they don't know how to ask for help. Once they're in the scamming compound, they're normally told straight away, you are here to now scam. If you don't want to do it, we'll punish you until you agree. And normally people will say, I'm not doing that. I want to go home. This is not what I signed up for. So they will bring someone in front of you and they will torture that person until you agree to scam. And they will say, if you don't agree to scam, this is going to be you next time. If you push the point, they will then start torturing you and they might put you in prison or in the dark room and string you up by your hands, beat you in the dark until you submit. For the most part, most people will agree at that point. So then they teach you how to do the scam. They teach you how to lure clients. Depending on the group that you're put in the company, you might be in the phishing group where your job is just to get new contacts, start the engaging with them and move them across to, let's say, WhatsApp, and then they go on to the next cell. Or you might be in the group where you have to gain the first deposits. So then your job is to start a connection with that person. And it's not like a saucy, spicy, romantic connection. This is like very mundane, black and white, just a companionship connection, which surprisingly a lot of people in the world are looking for right now. So it's ticking all the boxes in terms of I'm your friend and you're the only one that understands me. Everyone has a script that they can follow. And so when they've made this friendship or they're in this relationship, because romance scam is I would say the most popular one. There are property investments and shopping, online shopping and others, but romance scam is predominantly the one that they use to hook people in. Once you've made that connection, normally people will push to want to see someone face to face. So that's when they bring in a model. So they will bring in a model, you pass the model the script and you say, this is the persona you have to um, portray. That model gets on a video call. It's only for a few seconds, maybe a minute or two, and we'll have a chit chat. Ha ha ha, see, I am real. It's okay. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I've got to go quickly. And there's always an excuse not to video chat. But if they push the point, they can get a video chat, but it is with a model. There are some scamming compounds like KK Park and others who have been there for a while and invested a lot of infrastructure into what they do. And they have AI face swapping software, which is state of the art and super, super scary, and has really challenged my trust issues with online anything. But basically, they can have, say, an Ethiopian male sit in front of a camera and it comes across as an Asian female or a Caucasian female or someone just completely different. That's totally believable unless you know what you're looking at and what to look for to identify whether it is face swapping software or not. You would never know the difference. And there's some software out there now in the last 6 months where you can't really tell. Um, so thankfully, a lot of the scamming compounds don't have that level of investment of infrastructure, but there are many that do. So some companies have models on retainer, some don't. Um, and then once you are in the scamming compound, they will force you to sign a fake contract. Many people don't understand that it's a fake contract and think that now they're trapped in some kind of debt bondage and they have to fulfill the contract. There are some that will push and push and push and want to be released. If they are able to pay a ransom, then they are released most of the time. Sometimes they're sold to another compound. If they are not able to pay a ransom, there's some companies and some compounds that don't allow ransoms to be paid. Then their only other option is to either escape, which has happened, or to be released in some kind of mass release. So this photo on the bottom right, this is from February this year, where 261 individuals were taken out of Taichung and Zhaoqi by the DKBA. And it sparked then an ongoing release. So then after that, BGF coordinated with some of the local scamming compounds and went into companies and said, give us all the people that are not scamming well, and we will take them and say that we're rescuing survivors, victims of human trafficking. So there were around just over 9,000 that were taken out in the end, which was overwhelming for everybody to deal with. But it started with this first group of 261. Once they moved out of the scamming compound, they weren't allowed to come across to Thailand straight away. They were put in holding camps. So the first group that was moved across was the 261. Then after that, they've been moved across in staged approaches. So, for example, today is Tuesday, and there was a government to government transfer. So there are still groups from that original 9,000 plus being transferred from Myanmar to Thailand. So today they had groups transferred over from Myawaddy to Mesot through the Friendship Bridge too, and my staff were down there providing translation for the identification interview before they could then be released into the custody of their embassies. But with this 261, they all came across as one group and it stopped the system in its tracks. We did not have the infrastructure in place or the personnel in place to be able to support that many potential victims of trafficking at one time. The government had to get additional personnel in from other provinces to come and support this. And we weren't actually able to process any cases while these 261 were being processed. So we ended up having to call DSI, which is the Department of Special Investigations. They have special powers to investigate human trafficking. They're under the Ministry of Justice, so they're not police. But they ended up coming down to Mesot and screening some of our cases, and then we took them to Bangkok with DSI to process them in Bangkok. But generally, when a clients come across the river, they will be dropped somewhere in town, normally by a taxi, not by a trafficker. So they go maybe from a trafficker's car into public transport, and then that public transport car is then drops them somewhere, either at a hotel or maybe at a shopping center. So this top left-hand corner, this is Judah and I picking up two clients. And the taxi driver's job, he doesn't get paid until he verifies that he dropped them off at a certain location. So he has to take a photograph of him dropping them off and then he gets paid. Once they are dropped off, my organization, most of the time, we don't always have time to do this, but majority of the time we will do a forensic interview, gain as much intelligence as possible. This is anything from photographs, videos, crypto wallets, bosses' names, phone numbers, bank accounts, anything we can get from the victim. If we haven't been already collecting information from the victim while they've been trapped inside, which is something we do, we start from the very beginning, from the first contact, then we do it in that interview. We compile that all together. We use what we need to support their screening statement. So this is also an opportunity where we explain what their rights are and what the process is to report to Thai authorities. And we walk alongside with them while they report to authorities. So we go with them to immigration. They have to be screened by an immigration officer. We provide a supporting statement for that. And then if they have indicators of being a potential victim of trafficking, they're moved into a shelter, a government shelter, where they await to sit their MDT. So that left-hand side on the bottom, that photograph is in the government shelter. That's our operations manager, Yuki, speaking to several clients and translating what the officer is saying because he didn't speak English. But she was basically explaining the process of what's happening because they were asking how many days they needed to stay there. Once they're in that shelter, they then have to sit a victim identification interview in front of an MDT or a multidisciplinary team panel. So in the top right-hand photo, this is actually an MDT happening in place. So the man in the purple shirt is a Kenyan potential victim, and then his MDT panel was made up of immigration, labor, DSI, and Royal Thai Police officers. And then my operations manager, Yuki, was his translator, and I was his advocate for the day. Once you sit through that victim identification interview, if you're identified as a victim, you then are sent to a government shelter. If you're not identified as a victim, you're actually arrested and sent for deportation. So you have to go to court, pay a small fine for immigration violations, which is entering Thailand illegally across the river. And then you're sent to immigration detention in Bangkok and deported back to your home country. Generally, you have to pay for that flight. So if you don't have money, you sit on a waiting list for up to 18 months to get a free flight home. There are times when we have large groups identified as victims and then large groups not. It depends on the MDT at the time, so the panel at the time. The national referral mechanism is the process that Thailand uses to identify and protect victims of trafficking. And while it is a good framework, there are still missing robust SOPs around that and how it should be rolled out. So every MDT can potentially be different. And then there's also opportunities there for personal bias to come in play. So that's why working alongside with CSOs is important so you can have a case advocate and a translator to make sure that the communication is clear on both sides. And then the potential victim has the best possible chance of either being identified or not identified, but it's not because of any kind of breakdown in communication or misunderstandings. This photograph here is actually taken the other day on the 31st of October. We have recently had 1,500 personnel were able to walk out of KK Park. So I said earlier that the Burmese military entered into KK Park, and there's been some fighting between the ethnic armed groups and controlling that territory. When the Burmese military entered in through KK6, they allowed many of the scamming uh, companies or their workers and also potential victims to walk out. They all walked out and were encouraged to cross into Thailand. So they all crossed the river, 1,500 of them in the end. Um, my team was a part of the core team of translators translating the screening interviews. Generally, I would say that um, in scamming compounds, there are majority are victims. Coming out of KK Park and out of that 1,500, I would say the majority of those were willing scammers or career scammers. There were many victims in that group or potential victims, but there were a lot of career scammers. And out of everyone who was screened, they all chose to go immigration violation because they had the funds to be able to pay for their flights home. Now, coming from poor communities, that means they were either had wealthy families, they were able to get the money together by borrowing money to pay for flights, or they were paid well while they were in there, like running the scam, which shows their complicit nature of it. But we would still say that the majority of people in most scamming compounds are actually potential victims. This is just a very unique side coming out of KK Park because KK Park is starting to flip more into career scammers rather than using human trafficking victims for everything. I want to take you now quickly to Nairobi. This is probably one of the hardest cases we've ever had. We had a girl called Grace. She's from Kenya, and she was trafficked into KK Park. She was only there for 4 months. She was told about the job by a relative. And once she was there, she realized that this is not what she signed up for. But then she also had a miscarriage. And so they forced her to have surgery, and they didn't do that surgery properly to clear the fetus, and there was infections. Throughout that whole time, her scamming boss and one of her colleagues was trying to extort money out of her family, saying that she's critically ill. If she doesn't have the surgery, she's going to die. So you need to pay money so then she can live. And they would send her clips and messages, send them clips and messages every day to try and get money. We were referred this case by the embassy, who contacted us and said, we have a Kenyan national in a hospital in Mesot, and we don't know where she is. We don't know how to get to her, and they're not telling us any information. What had happened is they had botched the surgery in KK Park, and she had developed an infection and then um, had gone septic. And so they brought her across to Mesot unconscious, and she was intubated. And they were still trying to extort money out of the family, even while she was in the hospital in Mesot. So we worked out where she was, which hospital she was in our town, and I contacted the hospital and had her moved to a secure women's ward, which got rid of the scamming boss. So he went back to KK Park. Then we had to deal with her colleague who was still contacting her family trying to get money. And I made an arrangement with the embassy where I told her colleague that we had money for her. I just needed to cite her passport. So she met me at a particular place in the hospital. As soon as I had her passport in hand, she was arrested and she went immigration violation. And then we were able to secure Grace. Unfortunately, Grace did not wake up, and we had to speak to the family and explain that situation to them. And they were unable to get to Massot in time to say goodbye. So we tried to do that over video call as best we could from ICU. And then we ended up having to turn off the machine and send her body back to Kenya. That is probably one of the most extreme cases we've had. But what got me out of that whole thing is that even when she was on her deathbed and they knew she wasn't going to wake up, she was intubated and they knew her organs were failing, they were still trying to get any money they could out of the family. Just the lies and the manipulation. Even if it was just like $1,000, they were still trying to get just something to be able to put back into the company, and they didn't care. So that case has probably stayed with us since it's happened. I don't think it'll ever go away, but it's a reminder, especially for us, of how dangerous this industry can be because these people aren't, we are not seen as human. We're seen as a commodity, just another thing to make money off. So we're not seen as victims or potential victims or human beings. We are just something, just an asset. And when we no longer work and they can no longer get any money out of you, they will just discard you and walk away. I want to talk about regional and international responses now. We've had a bit of a mixed response to this global crisis. And I say global crisis because it is spreading across the globe. So we have on record 153 countries that this has touched, whether that's having victims of financial scams or having citizens being trafficked as human trafficking victims. That's nearly every country in the world. Um, there are many countries trying to work on prevention mechanisms um, for this to prevent their citizens from being trafficked in the first place or being targeted by scams, excuse me, by scammers. Um, I would say there's probably been a mixed response. In Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines are very proactive in protecting their citizens. Also Singapore. Um, they are working on um, prevention campaigns locally and then spreading those internationally. They've also, I mean, the Philippines, for example, has set up an entire unit that is in place when they have their citizens have been trafficked and they're repatriated, that unit then, it's a government department, screens them, gets them support from civil society or social welfare, and then tracks them so they can follow up later on throughout their reintegration and then work out where the gaps are in terms of how did they get trafficked in the first place and how can we solve those issues. So that's one country that's being very proactive. There are some that are still in denial about that this is an issue. Um, but there are scamming centers and scamming compounds growing and spreading across the globe. So they're in Cambodia, Laos, excuse me, Philippines, Malaysia. There's scamming compounds or centers in Dubai, in Kenya, Uganda, Nairobi, down in Brazil, and over in Ukraine as well, and Russia. So they're spreading basically unchecked. And unfortunately, we are only um, We are only as prepared as the laws we have to work with, and our laws across the globe are very, very behind in terms of tech, in terms of um, money laundering, human trafficking, you name it. So I know there are ongoing initiatives, especially across Southeast Asia, to update laws, to review laws, to adopt the forced criminality typology, crime typology. UNODC has developed many indicators on how to actually identify forced criminality as with victim identification used developed developed identifiers you can use for victim identification for forced criminality. And many countries across Southeast Asia are adopting those within ASEAN. There's something that has been developed called the ERN, which is the Emergency Response Network, which we've partnered with. It is an initiative by UNODC where law enforcement agencies across Southeast Asia have joined the network and are working alongside each other to collaborate on cases and to investigate and track bad actors. They're working in partnership with CSOs like mine because we sit on the intel. So, excuse me, because we have daily contact with victims and potential victims. Um, we have gained a lot of information that we can pass on to them. We also are able to collaborate in real time on movements on the ground here as people are coming out of the scamming compound or as bad actors are moving through this area. Um, so the Emergency Response Network is made up of law enforcement, immigration, cyber security, and then also they have some social welfare arm to it as well. There's lots of prevention going on in the region in terms of staying safe in the digital space. There was a big campaign done in Thailand, and it's actually been rolled out across Southeast Asia, and that will continue to be rolled out in local communities as well, teaching young people how to stay safe online, whether it's from being scammed or being lured into trafficking, and being able to identify fake job ads and opportunities that are not legitimate. In the region, there's international conferences happening. Um, we're also a part of a network called AFN, Asia Freedom Network, which we're focusing on Southeast Asia and working with law enforcement, the financial sector, and then also immigration on tracking bad actors and being able to provide intelligence to support investigations, and then also to support victim identification and work in prevention of human trafficking victims. I think regionally in Southeast Asia, things are starting to ramp up and countries are starting to work together collaboratively. We've been saying for a long time there needs to be an international task force or an international focus on this. The US did launch the other day their strike force, cyber strike force, that they've got Treasury and FBI partnering together. They're also going to partner with, I'm sure, HSI and DEA on the ground here, which I'm hoping in the coming months we'll see some action from them. International sanctions are very important, and we've now had 2 rounds of sanctions, which is great. But if you don't follow up sanctions with action, then it doesn't do anything. It just causes problems on the ground where everybody panics a little bit, and then after 18 months, nothing happens, and so it goes back to normal. So if you want actions, I need to wrap it up. Sorry. Yes. Thank you, David. If you want to have sanctions in place and to freeze assets and seize them, that's great, but you've got to make sure that you follow up with investigations and then further actions on the ground. But I might wrap it up and leave it there.